So hello guys, and welcome to another tier list video, and today I will be ranking the bosses in the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake, and I specified the remake specifically because some of my views on certain bosses have changed since I played the original game, because they did make very minor adjustments to different things since the original game, and there's also two new bosses as well, and I'll give my opinion on those in a little bit. But let's start off with the first boss here, and that is the first Lord Crump fight. And for what it is, I would say this is a pretty decently good tutorial battle. I mean, naturally it's going to be in C tier. It's not really going to be any higher than that since it's a very basic boss. But it is a good way for newer players to learn the battle system and everything, so I think that's a pretty fitting placement for the first Lord Crump. It definitely is a pretty memorable battle, since, like, it is the first one in the game after all, and it does kind of give you an opportunity to learn how to use the boots and hammer, so I think it is a pretty decently good boss for that. And Gus, I would say, is B tier. I think he's a great boss to do during the prologue. If you do it any later than that, then he's down in C or D tier, but doing it during the prologue, like before the blooper, I would say definitely B tier, because that is pretty fun to learn how to do like super guards more effectively and everything, and it's definitely good for becoming a better player with doing Gus during the prologue. Definitely the best time to fight Gus. Like, I really don't recommend fighting him after that. But yeah. So, Big Blooper, I would say, is C tier, a little above Lord Crump. Because I feel like he doesn't make quite as much of a impact in terms of difficulty as Gus does, but still is a pretty good boss, like, for like what it is and everything. Since it is kind of a tutorial for, like, the items and everything, since the most effective way of taking them down is the fire flowers, so I think it's a decently good boss for what it is. And moving on to Chapter 1, we have the Gold Fuzzy and the Fuzzy Horde. I would say this one kind of goes between Big Blooper and Lord Crump, because I'd say this one is also decently good, but it could have been a little more difficult, because it is pretty easy if you got the guards down and everything. So it is a fairly easy boss for like what it is, even that early in the game, but I still think it's decent. And just keep in mind, the only tier that's really like actually meh or bad is D tier. C is just kind of okay and good for what it is if it's early in the game, because they're definitely outclassed by the later bosses. And these bosses aren't bad at all, I just think they definitely don't leave as much as an impact as these later bosses, but let's move on. So we have the Red Bones and Dull Bones. I would say this one is actually pretty good for what it is. Like, it's a good tutorial for Koops, since this is right after you have Koops. Like, since if you're using Goombella at the beginning of Hooktail's castle to get some of those new tattles in, you'll probably pull out Koops around this time, since this is where that story moment for Koops is, and the best way to take them down is using Koops. So I think it's pretty good, and it's definitely a pretty good increase in difficulty around this time, for newer players specifically. I mean, for veteran players and people who've been playing Thousand Year Door for a long time, not really, but like, for new players, I remember back when I played this game for the first time in 2020, this was a good kind of step up in difficulty, I would say. And with Hooktail, I would say probably the top of B tier, I would say, only because it's going to be outclassed by the other bosses, but yeah, Hooktail is definitely a pretty good first big boss here, and I think her weakness is pretty cool. I mean, it's definitely handled a lot better than weaknesses in the later Paper Mario games. It definitely leaves a pretty big impact in that part of the game. So yeah. So moving on, we have the Shadow Sirens, and I think this one is pretty good as well, since they're doing like 3 like targets at once that are fairly powerful at that point in the game. So you kind of have to manage your resources more and be careful about like dealing with 3 enemies here, but unfortunately you have to fight Vivian, which is kind of sad because Vivian is my favorite character, but you have to do it anyway. So I'm thinking maybe B tier a little below, maybe a little below Gus, I'd say. Just like fighting wise, character wise, I think the Shadow Sirens are, well, except for Bellum, are great. Especially Vivian. Vivian is my favorite character of all time, but I would say the fight is probably around here. I might change it as we go forward, but there is another Shadow Sirens fight to go, so I might change it later. So, the next one is Magnus von Grapple. In the original game, I thought this fight was kind of meh, even though Lord Crump looks really cool in the mech. I think the design of this boss is awesome, even though Goombella might not think it is. I think this one is actually pretty decent, I would say. Honestly, I might put it right below Hooktail here, because I think it is a pretty good boss. I feel like I kind of slept on it a little bit, because it still is pretty fun. And they definitely improved the music in the remake as well. So next up we have the Iron Adonis twins in Chapter 3. I'm a little bit mixed on this one. I think it is really cool how it is kind of like a roadblock in the story for getting like Yoshi and everything, but as a boss, it's not the most special thing. Like, once you get Yoshi, it's like extremely easy. I know that's the point, but for ranking these bosses, I'll put it in C tier. Like, I'm not going to put it in D tier because the gimmick behind them still is cool, but as a boss, it still is just kind of underwhelming, like from a gameplay perspective, but not bad. I would just say, like, just underwhelming when it comes to, like, I wish they were at least, like, a little more difficult, like with Yoshi. Like, maybe if I were to make any changes to Thousand Year Door, I would make it so where they'd have to be attacked once with Gulp, and then they'd lose their defense, I would say. Like, they'd just become, like, normal, clefs, kind of. So, yeah, that's kind of how I would put, like, the Iron Adonis twins here. But, yeah, for the first Bowser here, I would say this one is a decently good fight. I would say, maybe, I would say maybe B tier for this one. Like, a little above Hooktail, because I think this one is definitely decently good, and it comes, like, at surprise as well. Like, it's kind of similar to the other Bowser fight. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty good placement for the Glitz Pit Bowser here. Rockhawk? I would say, Rockhawk is kind of easy, I would say. And definitely trivialized by Yoshi. So, I would say Rockhawk, maybe maybe a little above Bowser, because, like, he is more fun and has better attacks than Bowser. So yeah, and it is still an exciting fight overall. So I would say maybe B tier for that one. Macho Grubba, I would say that one's the first A tier, because that one is pretty fun. And the cool thing about Macho Grubba is that he's the only boss that actually utilizes the Crystal Star, since he has the same abilities as Power Lift, but abuses it. So yeah, I think Macho Grubba is a pretty fun boss fight. And Atomic Boo? I'm honestly not sure if I should put this in A or B tier, because I do like this one. Since it is like an optional one, but it's not too hard as well. You know what? I'll put it in A tier for now, but I might change it. Because, I mean, it is still fun. It also has that banger new theme in the remake. So, I mean, I am definitely gonna give it credit for that. But, yeah. So, the first Dupless fight, I absolutely love Dupless as a character. Or Desmond, as I called him, to try not to spoil it for people. But, the first Dupless fight, I would say it's pretty good. Like, it is easy, but, like, it still is very memorable how he transforms into Mario and everything. So I will put it in A tier for that, because it is, like, still, like, a very memorable fight. But the second one definitely goes in S tier, because that is really cool, like, facing off against, like, the partners who are confused that it's, like, Mario, and then the whole thing with Vivian, like, sticking by you and everything. It's just an amazing fight overall. That one is definitely the first S tier one. And the first Dupless one, I would say, is still A tier, I would say. But moving on, we have the Embers. I think that's, like, an optional one as well. Or actually, I don't know, there's, like, a couple fights like that during Chapter 5. I kind of forgot this one a little bit, but I'm not sure. This might either be the one that's, like, at the camp that you have to fight, or the one where you, hit the stones outside of, Pirate's Grotto and get them wrong, and you get that fight. I'm not, it's either one of those, but either way, it's kind of underwhelming. It's literally just an enemy fight, so I'm just gonna put it in D tier. It technically counts as a boss because it's categorized as one in the game, but yeah, it technically is kind of an underwhelming boss. Cortez, on the other hand, I absolutely love. I think this boss is great. I mean, yeah, you could cheese it. I understand that all the bosses in Thousand Year Door can be cheesed, but Cortez is still really cool. I really like the fact that, like, with the final phase, you could use Flurry. Like, that's not something that the game tells you, but you could just do it anyway. I think that's cool. Honestly, I'm gonna put Cortez a little above Macho Grubba. Like, because for newer players, especially, like, Cortez actually can be kind of difficult, but, like, still, when you're good at the game, it still is a fun fight. And Cortez's design does go really hard. And the X-Naut fight after that with Lord Crump is also really fun as well. I'm honestly not sure which one is better, like the Lord Crump one or Cortez. I mean, aesthetically, Cortez is a little better, but Lord Crump one is just still so fun as well, like, especially when he just does, like, the X-Naut ball thing, and just rolls around on that, like the, Luiginary ball from Mario and Luigi Dream Team, kind of like that. And also the fact that he gets, like, the X-Nauts to do, like, a bunch of things, like hang from the ceiling, or just, like, just crowd up. It's just such a fun boss overall. It definitely deserves A tier. In the Smorg, I think the Smorg is pretty fun as well. Even though it's not that difficult, it still is a pretty cool idea as well. So it takes on, like, different forms. Aesthetically, it's pretty cool. It's almost, like, kind of, like, weird and interesting. Like, just, it's made up of a bunch of, like, smoggy blob creatures. It's just, like, a pretty cool boss overall, and I like the music of this as well. I mean, I like the music with Cortez, like, as well, but, like, Smorg, I would say, maybe, like, a little below Macho Grubba, since, like, it doesn't make quite as much of an impact as, like, Cortez or Macho Grubba, but it still is pretty good, I would say. And the next one is the Elite X-Nauts. This is another one that's basically like a glorified enemy battle. And this is just kind of underwhelming as well, so I'm just going to put that in D tier. Maybe a little above the Embers, since it is Uh, you know what? I'll just put it a little below it since it's later in the game and has even less of an excuse to be a separate boss. But yeah, I think that's fine. You know, the only reason why I'm doing like the dry bones ones a little higher, like or like the red bones, is because like that actually fit more in the context, I would say, and was actually like the red bones was like kind of like the only red bones in that area, so that like that definitely had that advantage there. But embers and elite X-Nauts, those are normal enemies in that area. But moving on, Magnus von Grapple 2.0, I would have to say this one is S tier too, like alongside the second Dupless. Because, I mean, one, the theme is an absolute banger, and even though it is technically a rehash of Magnus von Grapple, it has different moves. It has different moves. It sucks up the audience and it's just like, basically shoots them back out you. That is awesome. That is awesome. Like, it's just a really cool boss. Oh, it's just a really cool version of Magnus von Grapple. And I mean, maybe I'm being a little biased that it has like that banger theme in the remake, but I think it's S tier, honestly. I think it belongs in S tier. And the next one is the Dark Bones and Dry Bones one. And I want to put this in D tier, even though it kind of is leaning into that normal enemy category. I would say this one is still C tier, because it's still, like, it's still alright, I would say. Maybe, like, a little above the first Lord Crump one. Because it does have that, the music is pretty good in it, and it does kind of leave a little bit of an impact, even though it's not too difficult. So, I would say that one's alright. So, moving on, we have Gloomtail. And I would say Gloomtail is a pretty fun one. Definitely, like, pretty good in terms of difficulty. Like, Gloomtail is definitely, like, a step up in difficulty in that chapter. And it's just pretty fun, and can be pretty fun in challenge runs as well. I'm honestly going to put Gloomtail at the top of A tier, because I think it's a pretty good boss overall. And the next Shadow Sirens boss, including Dupless in this one, honestly, I think this belongs in A tier as well. Like, maybe a little below the Smorg. Is like, I still think this one is, like, pretty fun, and can actually be difficult in challenge runs sometimes. So, I think that one's pretty good overall. And next up is Grotus. And I think, like, it's definitely a pretty impactful fight story-wise. So, I think maybe, like, A tier would be good for this one. Maybe, like, I would say, like, maybe a little above Cortez, I would say. Because I think that one's pretty good overall. And with Bowser and Cammy, I really like this one. Like, especially since you have Cammy, who's, like, healing and buffing up Bowser that you have to worry about, and that Bowser has, like, all his moves and is even stronger than he was in Chapter 3. Like, dealing with that, and especially right after Grotus, is definitely a pretty good challenge, I would say. I mean, it kind of annoyed me back when I originally played the original version of this game back in 2020, but just, I do like the spike in difficulty, and the theme is also, it goes really hard as well. So, I'm not sure if I should put this in S tier or A tier. Maybe the top of A tier, I would say, because I think, you know what, I'll put it in S tier. That's alright. That's fine, I'll put it in S tier, because I think it still is worthy of S tier, honestly. Shadow Queen, and this includes all phases of it, definitely S tier. I think it's a pretty great final boss overall. Because, like, I mean, if you are unprepared, it can be difficult. But if you are used to the game, it's not too hard. But for newer players, it's absolutely, like, a pretty big jump in difficulty. But I think it is a pretty good boss overall. There's a lot of great moves with, like, the, dead hands that the Shadow Queen has. And then also dealing with, like, her two hands and everything. And just, like, all of her different attacks and just dealing with her, like, healing and everything. It's just really cool overall. And she also has, like, the invincible phase as well that a lot of Paper Mario bosses have. But it leaves so much impact. Like, the Shadow Queen's design is definitely pretty intimidating. It definitely does give the end of this game a pretty high stakes. And the fight and the gameplay definitely reflects that, I would say. It definitely is pretty exciting if you're not cheesing it and if you're not super over-leveled. But yeah, Shadow Queen is pretty good. And next one, I mean, from here on out, we're definitely gonna put these in S tier. Like, sorry for the spoilers, but Bone Tail, I would put even higher than the Shadow Queen, especially if you do it before you beat the game. Bone Tail is definitely a pretty memorable boss overall, and is definitely fairly difficult, I would say. And I think it's pretty fun to, like, take down, since there's, like, a lot of different strategies in doing so. I personally like to do, like, lip lock, trying to keep Flurry alive. You can also do that for Gloomtail as well, but for Bonetail, that's also great if you do it, like, after you get Flurry. But it's just really fun after going through, like, the whole pit. I know it can be exhausting for some people, but, like, I just think it's great. Like, one final challenge in the pit and everything. And they even made the reward better in the remake as well. You get 999 coins rather than just return postage, which was a really crappy badge. But now you actually get a good reward from Bonetail. So, I mean, I guess there's credit for that as well. But moving on, we have the super bosses that were added in the remake. And I'm going to save the best for last, but Waka is just absolutely incredible. I'm going to put Waka, yeah, maybe a little above Bonetail, I would say. Because Waka is just really cool. I really like the gimmick that Waka has with, like, whenever you jump on him, like, the Waka bumps come out of him, and even has, like, the red Waka bumps that, like, deal more damage as well, and then, like, he could, like, heal up using them, and then, like, attack you multiple times, and that is just so cool. Like, trying to use attacks that, like, don't hit the enemy multiple times, and trying to, like, strategize, is just so fun. I just really like how these new super bosses take advantage of the game's mechanics and everything. They honestly feel like, kind of similar to how modern Paper Mario has, like, certain gimmicks in bosses, but actually does it well. Like, it actually utilizes the Thousand Year Door gimmicks pretty well, and it doesn't throw in something stupid, like, you must use this attack in order to beat them. No, it's like, utilize the mechanics well in order to beat this boss. That is how the modern game should have handled bosses. It's basically taking that idea and actually applying it the Thousand Year Door extremely well, and I think Waka does that pretty well. And just Waka in general is just absolutely amazing, and that is, like, the best fan service we've ever gotten in the Paper Mario franchise so far. And I mean, the next one is pretty big fan service as well, but just Waka, like, the one character that appeared throughout the classic Paper Mario games and hasn't returned since Super Paper Mario, just, like, bringing him back as a super boss in just the grand return of classic Paper Mario with the Thousand Year Door remake is just incredible. Like, it's definitely one of the coolest things that they did in this remake. Definitely S tier. And finally, last but certainly not least, actually the best, Prince Mush. Prince Mush definitely deserves the top of S. This is a Paper Mario boss. This is absolutely incredible. Like, Prince Mush is just a really cool concept for a boss. Like, not only is it really cool from a lore perspective that you actually get to fight the first champion of the Glitz Pit, or it's also just a really difficult boss as well if you don't spend hours grinding trying to cheese it. It's really fun, and it just takes advantage of the game's mechanics. Like with super guarding, you have to like kind of break his stance like when you're battling him, and just super guard and like to kind of break him out of like his things and everything. I just think that's really cool. And he has like the different stances and everything where he does different moves, or you can't attack him when he's in like a certain stance. I think it's really cool how it does that. And it's just like, it does so much more than what the other Thousand Year Door bosses do. Like, it actually like takes advantage of the skills that you're learning throughout playing this game and everything. It's absolutely incredible. I'm surprised they haven't done anything this cool with the Thousand Year Door battle system so far. Well, maybe that's because this battle system hasn't returned since 2004. They're finally expanding upon it now, but Prince Mush, just top tier, definitely. But yeah, that's my ranking for the Thousand Year Door bosses. Yeah, I would say this looks pretty good overall. That's basically how I'd rank them here. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server and Twitter if you want to. Goodbye.